Right? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll come back to order. Next item on our agenda is supporting homes on Johnson's Pond resolution. Ms. Glanz, who's walking in the room right now, what timing? Ms. Glanz and Mr. Molds will be leading that presentation. I assume you'll be bringing with you the representatives of Village of Hope? Village of Hope, I'm sorry.
I think
don't know why
you can just invite,
that.
actually, Mr. Council President, you can just invite them to the,
You wanna just
to the
come up?
table and they can take it from there.
Please.
Yeah.
Friends.
I'm well. How are you?
We'll put you in the hot seat.
Welcome.
It's like
How are you?
twice
Great,
in a week.
Good.
I think we
So,
bumped into
Some
one.
other answer.
would you mind just starting by kind of walking us through the proposed development and partnership, and then giving us a sense of the request? We've got some documents in front of us, but if you would mind leading that?
Sure, great. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to come in front of you. I'm Andrew Hanson with Osprey Property Company. You've seen me in the past, and I'm excited to be back in front of you again. To my right is, T.J. Maloney. He's here as a member of the Board of Village of Hope. To my far left is Jim Finneran, who's here as the, interim executive director as well as treasurer of Village of Hope.
Correct?
And to my immediate left is Diane Clyde, who's a vice president of development from Homes for America.
Hello.
So collectively, we are all here to talk to you about Homes on Johnson's Pond, which is a project that I have been working on collaboratively for probably, has it been 2 years? It's been a while in the making, to try and help Village of Hope with their campus. They have, as approved, about a 5-acre parcel that was designed to be built out to almost 90 units. I think it was 88 different units. And when this was built in 90?
90.
They only built the 2 buildings and did not build the other remaining buildings because that was sort of their first focus. And the Village of Hope is a great organization, as you all well know, serving women and children who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. But as with any nonprofit, they've had their challenges, and they continue to do great work. But we're trying to figure out how to make use of the roughly 3.5 acres of property that they own. And the other challenge that the Village of Hope has is that the participants in their programs need some motivation to not only finish the program, but also somewhat of a challenge as they complete the program to find safe, decent, affordable housing. And so the plan that we've come up with in front of you is to build 2 new buildings housing a total of 63 units of affordable housing that would give preference to the graduates or the ladies and their families who complete the Village of Hope program. Which
So can I
absolutely.
interject, briefly about that? For the record, Thomas J. Maloney, and I am being recorded. No. So the Village of Hope is about 25. This is our 25th anniversary, and I think most of you know us. But briefly, the Village of Hope, when it first started, was a support for homeless men. And not women and children. And so our organization morphed basically from our first building was built approximately in 1990. It has 15 apartments, and they're small apartments. Most of them were 1-bedroom apartments, and were primarily designed to house homeless individual men. Our mission changed within a few years, and our sister agency, the Joseph House, now handles and has for many, many years most of the men issues, and we have been dealing with homeless or at-risk women and their children. So our program for the last 20 years has been focused on women and children. Part of the issues we have had over the years is we've had many, many requests for help with women who are at risk from abused relationships, etc. Many of those women have multiple children, and most of our units were 1-bedroom, so we could not house or help women in our program that had many children. Our program, very briefly, is a 2-year commitment, And people who sign up, women and many with children who sign up for the program, are required to rigorously abide by our program requirements. We have a curfew there. We have secured buildings with entry fobs. They are required to do life skills counseling, to either work or be going to school. If they don't have a GED, they have to get one. If they do have a GED, they're either working or getting post-secondary education. So we have been doing that for a number of years. Part of the problem that we face is most of these women, as Andrew mentioned, are homeless. And so when they successfully complete our program and have to go out into the community, it becomes somewhat difficult for them to locate housing because you're required to have a substantial amount of money to rent an apartment, security deposits, deposits for utilities. So you really have to come out the door with $2,500, $3,000 just to find an apartment. So part of what we had hoped to do with Andrew and with Homes for America is a project in which our residents would have a preference when they leave our program to have housing. And so the theory is that before or halfway through the program, they would apply for whatever assistance they may receive in terms of vouchers or that kind of thing, and then be eligible to go right essentially across our parking lot into this new facility. So part of it was economic, part of it was really to do an extension of our program. And as part of our commitment to Homes for America and theirs to us, we would share in some resources. We provide certain things for the program as it is to women at risk. And Homes for America also has some of the same things we provide that they provide to their residents. So we will be able to have a collaboration to continue to provide and to enhance our program for both folks in our program and folks who would be residing at homes on Johnson Pond. So that's a little background about what we do and how this morphed. And Andrew is absolutely correct. When we first got approval for our project 25 years ago, the original game plan was to have 6 buildings on that campus. And quite frankly, the ability for a nonprofit such as ourselves, and being the size that we are, to afford to build multi-million-dollar buildings is just probably never going to be a reality. So it was time, after lots of thought, to find a partner who we were comfortable with to move the program forward and to take advantage of 3.5 acres of our campus that we don't do anything with right now except pay to have the grass cut and the leaves raked. So that sort of was the genesis of us getting involved with Osprey and with Homes for America. And I apologize for interrupting, but wanted to give you a little background.
Given the very specific need, and pardon me for interrupting the presentations, but the very specific needs around this project, the 60% median income, or 60% of median income cap, I guess that would it be appropriately called a cap?
Yes.
Okay. And there's, I'm guessing, purpose to that, and anything higher than that is unlikely to fill the other needs and specific purposes of Village of Hope and your organizations. Is that fair to say? And if I'm understanding correctly, this is for those in the most need of affordable housing.
Yes, well, I would let Diane speak to that. She's the affordable housing expert. I'm just the dummy on.
So under the tax credit, we would apply for low-income housing tax credits, and under the tax credit rules, you can't offer units to anyone making more than 60% of the area median income. So we've set aside units at 30, 50, and 60% of the area median income, but the rents
50%,
30, 50, and 60. But the rents are, much lower than those thresholds, but it gives us the opportunity to offer units to those tenants that do make up to 60%.
I mean, I bring that
Is
up.
that-
Well, I bring that up because, I think one of the interests that we've discussed before in council is ensuring that, into the future, we have more mixed income in really anything that we approve or support or offer incentives for. I think at this point in time, we don't have those policies in place. We don't have that requirement in place. But I think it's something we're headed toward in the future. So although it may not be a limitation to this project, it's something that we want to think about in the future, rather than concentrating, those who make the least in certain areas. We want to ensure that there's really mixed affordability throughout the community. So just something to think about, and I recognize there may be a financing challenge because there's a particular tool that's being used here, the LIHTC credits, that's designed, a certain way. But I mean, I've also been in contact with many developers that say, no, we can absolutely use that for a portion of our project, and come up with a financing package that still allows us to build, with mixed affordability or mixed income. But I think I bring that up only so I understand the reasoning behind this project's specifications and limitations. Not to suggest that rule is in place, it's not, but it's something that we're thinking.
Because I'm an advocate for all this, I'm looking at this as a transitional, like you're saying. However, when those people leave, say you have, 15 apartments now?
Yes.
But when those 15 people leave from their apartment, are you going to, tear down Village of Hope?
No.
Thank you.
No.
Let it
So,
rotate through. That's what I want to
well,
rotate.
Shaney, thank you for bringing that up. So we currently have two approximately 10,000 square foot buildings on our campus. And one of those, building one, is got 15 units in it currently. And we have been able to, with the help of grants and some contributions from the community, to rehab some of those units to make them larger. And actually, I think we lost one unit, or we got rid of some storage space, but we've got a couple two-bedroom units in there now. We actually need some larger units. And then on the other side of building one is building two. And building two has had an interesting history. It housed for a number of years our administrative offices. We had for 14 years,
The clinic.
we had a Center for Clean Start for 14 years on our campus, which took up half of our administrative building. And then on the other half, and we sort of squeezed ourselves in there, we had a medical clinic. And a couple of years ago, because of the way healthcare is being provided now, we no longer thought that was our calling to, that it was having its own host of issues, financial and otherwise, compliance issues. So we no longer have Center for Clean Start. And we also had a child care facility for a number of years there in part of the building. So now we have essentially a 9,600 square foot building, which is being used for administration, and we don't have that many people there in administration. So we are currently figuring out what we're doing with the remainder of that large building that we have. And one of the thoughts is if this program goes forward and we were able to get some financial help from this program, we would be able to put up to 8 or 9 additional units in building number 2, so that we would potentially have 22 or 23 apartments for our transitional living program. And they would remain independent from, but share resources with this new project.
What's the turn, TJ?
Pardon?
What's the turn on the transition?
It's 2 years.
2 years max?
Yes.
And I assume they're staggered, so.
Well, they are, and so they're staggered. And, because of the business that we're in and have been in for a long time, if someone completes 2 years but has not yet secured a place to go, they may be there for another month or 2 or 3 because we don't put people out.
Right.
And then some people have dynamics that change, their life issues change, and so they may only be with us 8 months and then move to, Oregon. But the program requirement is 2 years. It takes that long we think, to get our residents where they need to be. So it's approximately 2 years, and it is staggered. It staggers because we don't have everybody in it.
And this housing that you're talking about building,
Yes.
that's not transitional.
That is not transitional living. That is
That's gonna-
apartment.
That's
They
going to
are
fill up pretty quick.
Well, they hope they fill up and they hope they stay. So they don't really want the transitional aspect of that. And quite
Right.
frankly, for people who come through our program and for other people in similar situations, they want something more permanent that they call their home, so that they would move into, hopefully, one of these units and stay for a very, very long time. But again, you know, some people are transitory, but the goal is they would leave our community, go across basically the parking lot, and we would have some, you know, preference to have our people placed, as well as other people in the community who need housing in this marketplace.
And when you said that, excuse me, I hadn't quite finished what I was going to say. And when you said what you just said now, other people in the community, there is a large, very large, homeless women and children. Halo is one example, and the Christian shelter is another. I don't know how the program is, I don't think the program is 2 years for these facilities, but I also look at when you empty out your place at Village of Hope.
Right.
You may be getting some of these families from the other places to move
Absolutely.
in where, so we're saying what Jake was saying a while ago about the multi-use purpose and income. There
Right.
can't do that for that particular project because you're gonna have the cycle of the women and children coming in from other facilities. Yeah.
And many of those, and Shani, thank you for that clarification. Many of Halo and many other organizations, including our local health department, are all referral sources for placement into our program. And just to be completely upfront about this, we're not a shelter, we're a transitional program that has program requirements. So you have to sort of meet the eligibility requirements to even come into our program. And so, yes, but a lot of those things you mentioned are sources for people in our program or for sources for people who would need this type of housing.
First thing, I need to disclose that I do serve on the Transitional Living Committee at Village of Hope, not on the board, on the committee that oversees the day-to-day operations with the women and children that are sheltered there, and making the program requirements, making sure that they're meeting that. And there are a lot that make the choice to leave there prior to their 2-year fulfillment, and there are some that make the 2 years and can't get in because the way our housing waiting lists are right now around here, you pretty much have to put your name on the list when you come in the door to hope to have a place at the end of the 2 years, assuming that you complete that whole program in that 2-year program. And you may or may not at that point have that place. I think what I kind of have in my head and what I think I'm hearing here is concern that how do you make sure that there is a place available even here for those persons leaving the Village of Hope program, though they'll have preference. You can't keep 15 places open all the time and make this work. You can't keep 2 places open all the time and make this work. So I know in filling up initially you have those preferences, but how do you do that on an ongoing basis? There's still no guarantee that they're going to have a spot when they leave there.
I think that's right, but what they'll gain is if we have a wait list and we have somebody that has completed the program and it's, from the transitional, they'll come to the top of the list.
Okay.
Before anybody else that isn't.
Right.
And trust me when I say, and Andrew will tell you that he and I have had many, many conversations, and he would also tell you probably on the record that I ask for a pot of gold every time we have a conversation. And one of those conversations had to do with that very issue about having dedicated units, and we really could not, in the type of housing this is and the way it's being funded, have any set number of units in this project dedicated to residents of the Village of Hope because it would violate multiple issues with both HUD and CDA and some others in terms of priority. So we don't talk about priority, we talk about preference. So that's a very good point, but that's how it would be dealt with.
And it's related, but it's not. So I was most recently in front of this council and appreciate all the support of Rivers Edge Apartments. And just speaking about the market, we were fortunate enough to open April 1st. And I was just putting together some notes real quick. We're not quite full. We have another 9 units that they haven't signed their leases yet, but they're in the process of being fully approved. So in those 5 months, we've been fortunate enough to have 80 folks who signed their leases. And 47 of those folks were artists and 19 were disabled. So as we have turnover, I think at the end of the day, we'll have about 76 who are either artists or disabled. And same thing with the preference for the folks who complete the Village of Hope program. Those artists will be at the top of the list so that as we do have turnover, which we will, the hope obviously would be to have 100% of the units either occupied by artists or disabled folks. So I think the two will work very similarly.
Okay.
And obviously, 15 units a month over 5 months is significant demand. I mean, it was hard to even move people in quick enough. There was so much interest. I think we'll see the same thing at Homes on Johnson's Pond as well.
When you say there is so much interest, I mean, what were the numbers like as far as applications, if you can share that?
I may have it at my fingertips, or I can follow up with more detail, but I know we've had lots and lots of applications. The problem is criminal and credit, we're very strict on that and would imagine being the same at Homes on Johnson's Pond. And then obviously you have to not make too much income to meet the 60% test, and you also have to make enough to be able to afford the rents. So let me just glance at this real quick.
A few months ago, you gave us a number of about 2,000 applicants for.
2,000 folks had called to put their name on the waiting list, or put their name on the list that they wanted to be able to find out more information. So a lot of folks have come through. Some folks have not loved the neighborhood. Other folks have made too much, too little, have had problems with criminal credit. And I'm just glancing here and see we've had a good number of folks who were denied, had problems for criminal, had problems for credit. The other problem is you can't be a full-time student. That caused some problems. And then other folks, because we're about 3 months behind schedule, didn't want to wait. And obviously there's lots of other options. We had some weather problems. We had some issues at the site. So I think that took away some of the interest. But still, to be full in almost 5 months, I think is a testament to a really quality project.
So similar to that project and other affordable housing projects, the request today is for support, a waiver of EDU fees, and the offering of a pilot, correct?
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can we just go through the details of each of those, please?
Sure.
The EDU fee, or fees associated with EDUs, I guess this estimate, is, I don't have it in front of me, I lost
It's
it.
2,000.
$222,579.
Okay,
I'm sorry, say that again, Tom.
$222,579 for the 63 EDUs.
and that, I also don't have directly in front of me right now, I'm looking for it again, is the ordinance that created that particular arrangement.
1211.
1211.
Okay. Or is it a resolution, 1211, or ordinance? Resolution 1211, that's what I thought, okay. All right, and right, 1211, I see that, for affordable housing, $222,579. And the second is the offer to pay a pilot.
Yes, sir.
Now, help me understand the numbers on that pilot, please.
Sure, I can help you with that. So right now, the property is not paying any tax whatsoever, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
So it's not on the tax rolls per se. And so as a part of developing Homes on Johnson's Pond, we would create an approximate 3.5 acre parcel, which would be a triangular shape that would be closest to, let's see, it would not be on the lake side, so it would be closest to Lake Street. And that would be on the tax rolls because that would be owned by a for-profit, as Village of Hope and Homes for America, as the long-term owners, would form a for-profit. So it would come back on the tax rolls, but what we're asking for is a reduction, very similar to River's Edge, of $100 per unit per year. So basically, you take what the tax bill due to the city is, in this case, reduce it by $6,300 or $100 per unit per year.
So it's $252,000 total over the 40 years.
Okay, so that's that's per year for 40 years.
40 years.
And so part of the, I guess just to, since Councilman Heath is relatively new, just to, I guess, talk about the resources that we're going to be requesting. So we will collectively put in an application, a competitive application for resources at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD, For their competitive tax credits, which is for affordable housing restricted to 60% of the area median income and less, we'll also request loan funds that come with that, known as rental housing funds, which is a 40-year debt product. And so this is a competitive application where lots of developers with lots of locations throughout Maryland all try and get the highest score possible. Because typically in a once-a-year competition, which is going in approximately 30 days, everyone's trying to get the highest score possible because they only take the top 10 or 12 out of as many as 25, 30, 35. We don't know how many for sure. So Homes on Johnson's Pond, as we have kind of contemplated it collectively, we'd like to submit, we'd like to score as high as possible so we receive these resources. The beauty of the tax credits is that in essence, it creates equity from investors, which allows us to, instead of taking on a significant amount of debt, if this is a $10 million project, we can take on probably $2 or $3 million worth of debt, which allows us to rent apartments for $400, $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 a month, as opposed to $1,000, $1,500 a month. We agree to build a project and to maintain it long term, and it has an extended use affordability, which means basically for the next 40 years, the project will serve as affordable housing and serve only those who make 60% and less of the area median income. We try and build quality product. We try and use durable materials, high efficiency systems, Energy Star systems. We try and keep the operating costs down. And that's another benefit of the pilot, is not only does it help us score a higher score in the competitive process, but it also helps on the operating expenses, because to rent units at $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 a month is not a huge amount of money coming in. So that also helps to provide a long-term assistance to the project as we are trying to pay all the other expenses that a project has. Water, sewer, taxes, staff, insurance, maintenance, all these other things.
Okay. Well, recognizing the good work that Village of Hope does and, wanting to support that work, I'm comfortable with the byproduct, I guess, of Resolution 1211, allowing us to waive the affordable house, or waive the EDUs. The pilot, I'm not sure I fully understand the arrangement, but I recognize that the city's getting something it currently isn't. So I want to like it. I just don't
Between
fully
6 and 300
understand
a
it.
year.
Right.
Well, and if it
Basically, a $100 per unit tax credit,
Right.
yeah,
Essentially.
a reduction. Right now, we're getting nothing
Right.
on in terms of taxes for that property. Once it's built out, we will less $100 per unit.
Right.
And if it would,
63 units, 40 years, $252,000.
$252,000.
That's
That's
the
right,
number I
at
gave.
250.
if it would be helpful,
Over the life.
I sort of modeled, or we modeled this resolution that we asked for after River's Edge. The difference at River's Edge was we had a project, we knew it was moving forward, we had an entity, whereas we're not quite at that point. We could send you a draft payment in lieu of tax agreement if that would be helpful. I just didn't think it was appropriate to have the council or whoever would be signing that document at this early stage. That's why I thought it was more appropriate to have the resolution.
Well, and you'll need that you don't need that in order to make your application to DHCD, correct?
The resolution provides what we need for the moment, but as the project hopefully is funded and moving forward, then we would need the pilot,
Okay.
the actual agreement itself.
Yeah.
So if it would be helpful to send that to you, we certainly can do that.
I think it'd be helpful at this point for everybody to see everything that is being requested and proposed. That being said, are there other questions?
I have one question. In the transitional area, I'm just making the assumption that all of the residents there in their 2 years are either underemployed or unemployed. And what do they do with the children when they're out at work? Where do the kids go? What is the daycare facility?
Well,
Or what do they do for daycare?
go ahead, Jim.
Jim, you want to?
Sure. Mr. Spies, our women, when they come in, they have a 2-month waiver from being employed. It used to be they had to have some kind of an income when they came in, of what it might be. It might be, some kind of federal monies coming in or employment. Now, for 2 months, that's waived. simply responding to the situation of the homeless in the area right now. When they come in with children, we do not have daycare for the children. We work with the situation. Our women work together. When one goes to work, you can often find others taking care of their children. They may bring they are allowed to have relatives come in to care for the children. They may send the children to daycare. And until recently, most of our children were in school. So they were in school for normal school hours. We have a very nice situation, but a very challenging one right now. Our population, we have 6 children under the age of 6, and 1 more on the way. And that one on the way, my phone hasn't rung yet, but that one may be here already.
Dueling calls.
It was a little imminent yesterday, so we'll have to see. Challenging problem, tough one that we are able to work around through mutual cooperation. We do have one very strict rule, and that is a mother may never leave a child unattended, under any circumstances.
At any age.
So I think, I haven't answered this to saying we have a strict, 10-point program on this, but it is a situation that we're very well aware of, and we do have it worked out for right now. Great question. We do want everyone there to either be employed or in school, one of the two.
And a lot of them are eligible for purchase of care,
If they have.
particularly if
Right.
they're
If they have.
unskilled and have, if there's funding. And there are no children, they're only allowed there through the age of 12, so
What was the last, I'm sorry?
there are only children through the age of 12, so they're
Okay.
going to be
Thank you.
under
Right,
13.
right.
And I know Mr. Day wants to move on, but it is a challenge because many of the women who come in, really, we need to work with them, and that's part of what we do with our social workers, is to get them signed up for everything they can possibly apply for and be entitled to, because many of them come with us and they're not getting anything for themselves or their children. So that is a process in itself, because there's lots of ways to get them assistance. They're just not, A, familiar with it, and B, never done it. So that's part of what we do, and one of them is the purchase of care for daycare services.
Let alone some of the personal issues, which may be separation from spouse or custody issues, et cetera, et
It's
cetera.
a challenge for all of them, candidly. And one of the things I can say is we have been very fortunate with community support to provide all of our residents with psychological services.
Excellent.
So,
I don't mean to rush.
I know, rush me.
Apologize.
Okay,
That being said,
Rush me.
I'm fine with it.
that being said.
My phone thinks the meeting's over already, it's
What's
making
that?
noise. My
There you
phone
go.
thinks it's done already, it's making noise.
All right,
Sorry about that.
Good
at this
question.
point in time, the next action would be to move this to legislative session. And then we'd like to see I think we'd like to see the resolution for the pilot as well, so that we can.
You mean the pilot agreement?
The pilot agreement,
Right.
correct. Is there consensus to move this to
Yes.
legislative session?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your
Thank
time.
Okay.
Susan,
Thanks.
would you mind if, actually, he stepped out. Are you sure? You gonna be, do you mind
Have a
sticking
good
around
night.
with us for a
Thank
little
you.
bit? Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Thank you.
See
Appreciate
you,
it.
Mr. Finneran. Take
Mr.
care.
Finneran, thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate
All
it.
right. What I'd like to do is move the city curfew item next on the agenda, which is, I think, just an update on dates. Colonel Monshine, would you mind coming forward? And then we have Safe Streets grant and Stop Gun Violence grant. Will you be joining us for those as well? Okay. We'll start with the curfew. Floor is yours.
Okay. I will open it up to any questions, or I know the chief sat in on the last meeting. I do not have any updates from the meeting the chief went to, so I'm not sure what the discussion was. I don't think there was too many changes that I was aware of.
No, I think the primary purpose of keeping, or putting it on the agenda today was that there are several scheduled upcoming public community meetings.
Right.
And I was just wondering if you had the dates. If not,
I do not have the dates, I
Well, one's
apologize.
Thursday.
We have them, hold
All
on.
right.
Wednesday night at St. Francis.
Wait a minute, can we get dates and times so it's
Sure.
not confusing to people?
I'll do it.
Time and place.
Hold on one second. I've got 6 p.m.
Yep.
Wednesday, August 19th
Yep,
at St. Francis.
yep.
And the 26th
St.
at
Paul's.
6.
Got 7 p.m.
St. Paul's.
on August 20th
August
at
20th.
St. Paul's. Is that right? That everyone else has at St. Paul's AME Zion, 410 Delaware.
Delaware Avenue.
And then I've got August 26th, Poplar Hill Mansion.
Right.
Why is it at Poplar Hill?
At 6.
I don't know.
I have a question about
What time
that
is that one?
location.
6
Thank you.
p.m.
Why was that at Poplar Hill Mansion? Why was it scheduled there?
I have to refer back to the colonel because I think Ms. Chestnut actually worked on scheduling those, making
I
arrangements for
can
those
get an answer
locations.
for you, but
We don't need it there. And I'll tell you why, because people are not gonna go there.
What date was that?
I can get that rescheduled.
I think it needs to be in the center of the community, either somewhere on Church Street. Because Church Street has not been listed.
Well, I think the intent was to do 5. We have these first 3 scheduled right
I mean,
now,
that may
so we're
be-
still.
Why would you have it
That
at
may be
Poplar Hill Mansion?
scheduled for Newtown. May
Councilwoman
be
Shields,
scheduled for purposes of Newtown.
I'm not sure.
I'm just saying, they've got the seating arrangement. If you've been into Poplar Hill,
There's,
it's not enough seating. Number one. I would have contacted, churches in that area, Bethesda or Trinity, because Trinity has that place on Broad Street that they bought. You know they have.
Sure, we can look into it.
Look at
I'm
that
sure.
and see if they can change that. Newtown still can come,
Right.
but it just, the location was, I was just worried about antique furniture and stuff. You don't never know who's gonna come there. So I think Bethesda or Trinity would be, I would check with Trinity.
would Chipman Center be an option?
But Chipman's always available.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying, location, that's Wycomico Presbyterian Church.
in terms of accommodating the numbers of people
People that
that
might want.
could
you know,
get
come
from any
there.
given
'Cause
area.
really, Poplar Hill doesn't have seating for that.
Now, I think Jake is right that that was kind of going with, that's where the neighborhood has their meetings, their neighborhood association meetings. And that particular one was kind of targeted at the Newtown community, because this is, I understand your point about having them in the community, but the whole city is the community, because this is a citywide ordinance. So I think moving them around
If you have a
is,
neighborhood association meeting, maybe, but you're saying a community meeting. If you
right,
have a Newtown community meeting, that's something different, but this was supposed to be a community meeting. So when you say the community, you should, because the Johnson Lake people may come, see.
yeah. No, I agree,
Yeah.
I agree with you, it needs more space than
It
that,
needs
but I
more
think that
space.
may be where that came from. It's
Yeah,
like, where do
yeah.
you have your meetings?
Yeah.
Why don't we look into other 2 alternatives?
Yeah.
Maybe
There's a
Christine
whole
can.
list of churches.
Bethesda might be best. It's
Bethesda,
big.
yeah, yeah.
It's got
It's
plenty of
accessible.
space.
Handicap accessible.
Handicap accessible, there's parking, it's convenient.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I'll be the one Thursday on my
Thanks,
birthday.
Next item is, I've got the Safe Streets grant and the Stop the Gun Violence grant. And we can start with the Stop the Gun Violence grant, reduction grant, if you'd like. Given that, I know we've got Safe Streets representatives in the hall.
Well, the gun violence grant is a governor's office crime prevention pass-through grant that we apply for annually. Traditionally, the past 4 or 5 years, we've received about the same amount of money. It's $34,500, and we use that for police overtime and fringe, and 30% of their fringe benefit to help reduce or try to reduce the gun violence. And we do that through basically through the new implementation of PredPol and the crime data to put officers out there during periods of time where we think that it's more likely than not that we'll be able to have an impact on gun violence.
I'm
And we
having a
also
hard
use
time
that-
hearing you. Could you
I'm
get
sorry.
a little, sorry.
We also use those funds to, for our tactical unit to serve search warrants where we believe there's a gun involved in a search warrant in a house that syndrome. So it's as simple as that. It's just basically to reduce offset the cost of overtime for the city, also to, which if we lost that grant, we would have to request more overtime because those type of calls, those type of incidents aren't going to, generally speaking, don't get reduced as far as the amount of search warrants that we're serving with our tactical unit and so forth where it's just unsafe to send officers in that aren't equipped to, or when you know particularly that there may be a weapon involved in a house. So it's just not as safe as you would as far as using a tactical unit.
So the 34,500, is that comparable to what we've received in the past?
It is.
Okay.
Let's say for the last 3 or 4 years at least.
Last 3 or 4 years? Okay. And, okay, all right. Questions?
I have a question. The $35,000, I understand, is for the police officers. At the community meeting initial meeting that the mayor had the other night, it was brought up, about the buyback program. I don't know if there's any grants wherein you could give faith-based or another organization where people could carry their guns. They were stating that why would people bring their guns into the police station when there's cameras, and they would probably feel intimidated because they say they wouldn't use it against them, but people are not trusting.
Right.
So they were talking about buyback in Baltimore, Jamal Bryant. They have other places, neutral places, where people can bring their guns, which could be the fire department or a church that could buy back the guns. So what I'm asking you to do, if you could find a grant that could fund maybe buying 100 guns, because to me, that's reducing crime also when you get the guns off the street. If people would bring them in, so just could you check that out?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or the purpose of that, if could including even your grant, when you apply for the 35,000, if you could add maybe $1,000, extra just to buy for a buyback program.
Try to.
I don't know enough about the success of gun buyback programs, and I'm
I
sure.
don't know either.
Yeah, but I mean, the point was well taken at the
Yeah.
discussion a few nights
I mean, he
ago.
could definitely research all that, break the success of that stuff. I
It's a
don't,
valuable conversation.
yeah.
Do
I just threw it out there for you.
The other grant we have before us, well, first quickly, I should say, is there council consensus to move
Yes.
that to legislative session?
Yes.
Yes.
Consent agenda?
Yes.
Then the next item is Safe Streets. Safe Streets.
And we'll point out a typo
Former
on
Safe
that
Streets person is.
line 26.
Is here. The other item is the Safe Streets grant in the amount of $208,000.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Well, this grant, since we've had it, this is about, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's our 5th year receiving grant funds, maybe our 6th, but I think it's 5th year for receiving grant funds. Since inception, this grant has been reduced a little bit each year since we've gotten it. We were reduced this year by a little over about $52,000. And what we're being told is it's the main reason for the reduction is simply because they're opening up more Safe Streets sites within the state each year, and so they're trying to fund all the sites. So it just stands to reason that there's a little bit of a reduction this year to compensate for or to consolidate some of the things we're doing under the Safe Streets, not to lose too much. We under last year's grant, the year before, and the year before that, we have our Ms. Chestnut, our Safe Streets coordinator, and a crime analyst that were paid for under Safe Streets. What we did is we took the core job duties from each of those positions and consolidated those and just basically eliminated the crime analyst position, but incorporated some of those core duties into the coordinator's position. So Ms. Chestnut is now doing some of the core functions of the analyst, along with some of the core functions that she had. So that was a reduction in order to keep some of the overtime and to properly fund some of the other things that we had. Because if we were to try to fund everything that we had going, there just simply wouldn't have been any money for any overtime that would have been associated with Safe Streets.
Understood.
It also funds, in addition to that position, it also, again, as I mentioned, it offers some overtime for SPD this year. It amounted to $30,000. and the sheriff's department receives $10,000 in overtime. And this is to work for police officers to work in the Safe Streets area. We do a lot of joint operations with them also to reduce targeted enforcement, to reduce violent crime. And it also pays for a community prosecutor for the state's attorney's office. That would be salary and benefits. And that really is that one position is basically almost 50% of the grant now. So this is mainly a salary-based grant now. It's just in each year as it gets reduced, if next year it does get reduced again, it's going to be, I think what it's really going to come out to is a position-based.
Have we received an explanation from the state as to why it's being reduced?
Well, the information that we're receiving back is that the state is opening up additional sites statewide, and that the costs associated with that is forcing them to reduce some of and we are one of the original, we are actually the second year Safe Streets was in fruition, and we were the second site or second or third site to have Safe Streets.
And they expect us to progressively pick up more of the.
With any program like this, generally speaking, they look to transition out, or the program shifts somewhat. So I would look for that.
Here's my question. I looked at the budget, and from what I can tell, we budgeted $255,558 this year for Safe Streets money, and we're getting $208. So where are the additional $47,558?
Well, we consolidated the one position I'd mentioned with the Safe Streets coordinator. And
But I think that was already done within that 255,000. But we didn't get 255,000. We have in our budget as a revenue line, $255,558, and we didn't get that.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how that occurred. I can tell you that when we get a budget notice, in other words, what happens in this situation is the governor's office sends out a notice to us, in this case, probably in February or thereabouts. And they'll say, frankly, Salisbury is or City of Salisbury is eligible to apply for $208,000. So we budgeted around 208, not 250 something, so I'm not exactly sure how that would have occurred.
Okay, because I still have those lines open, yeah. I'm looking at, in your department, 01000, object code 424102, it says supplement, and it's got, where are we at? 78,000 in that, a little over, and then 424-103 municipal, and the comment is per Office of Crime Control and Prevention, 177,450. I'm sorry, but there was a breakout in here for. I mean, I can work with the administration about it and make sure on those numbers. But what I was adding up.
Yeah, I can certainly get you answers to that as far as the revenue lines and so forth. But I can tell you that we were working since we got that notice. But basically, what that allows us to do is say, well, here's what we funded last year, and obviously we're not getting that amount. We're getting this amount, so we have to cut.
That amount.
So we have to cut somewhere, and that's when we started the conversation, Chief Duncan and I and the command staff, as to what exactly we were going to cut. And we had also approached the county, and particularly going into next year.
Right.
As far as the potential of them picking up a portion of the Safe Streets prosecutor's salary line. That's certainly not my decision. That's the chief's decision and the city, administration's decision how they want to approach that.
One of the concerns that I have is when we attended the award ceremony for the officers, and they started talking about closing of cases. I can remember it vividly. And with every group, that person I think that you're talking about that we've eliminated was up there, standing up there with them, and each time the chief referred to the fact that they played an integral role in closing that case. My concern is, if you take that, do you remember, Shani, when we were? My concern is, without that individual, what kind of impact are we going to have in our ability to close those cases in a timely manner? And these were not shoplifting; these were major issues.
Right. We have two, or we had two, I should say, crime analysts Kendall Hearn is our full-time crime analyst, does a great job, and of course, some of the expectations and duties that she does have been increased somewhat to absorb some of that workload. We also recently hired a police officer, now intel analyst for our criminal investigation division, that has the skill set to be able to assist in that, where before we didn't have that. Also, again, with Ms. Chestnut, with some of the more basic functions of the analyst, she's able to do, and she's learning how to do some of the more technical
So you
aspects.
feel comfortable with the people you have in place now so that impact of those closures will
So
be
far,
maintained?
2 months, basically 2 months into this fiscal year with the Safe Streets, things have seemed to be working out well. I'd like to give that another 4 months to really be able to
Okay.
give you a
Fair
clear
enough.
answer as to whether we really feel long-term
Fair
that's
enough.
gonna work. But
Quick question, are there any asset forfeiture funds that are generated by this program?
we could check with our criminal division to see what cases that they still have open or have closed in the past couple of years to see if there are some assets. I want to tell you there are. I think there are some vehicle and cash assets that have been, but I could get you specific information on that over the last several years.
That might help with the bottom line.
And we'll check internally to see if there is a discrepancy between the revenue line as presented and what's being provided here in the way of the grant, so
Yeah, because, I
I'll
mean,
check
there
into
could
that.
be other things in that line, but they have specific notes about crime control and prevention, the governor's office, and I just want to make sure that I knew that we expected some reduction, that we didn't get more of a reduction than what we budgeted, and if so, that we're making
It
adjustments.
may be, and I'm just speculating, but it may be when we first started our budget discussions, they didn't know specifically what the reduction would be, and maybe that number somehow or another didn't get changed or something, just speculating. But that's because it sounds like the figure you're using is last year's number, it sounds like.
It's in
That,
the-
that would still be a problem though if we were showing it at the
It's in the
255 and it came
2016
in,
line.
yeah,
And
right.
it's- and
We'll look into it.
255 was last year, I think last year's figure.
Yeah, well, it's two lines combined, it's not, so, I don't know. Anyway, they'll check it out. That's all I wanted to do was get somebody to look and make sure if we have a shortfall, we address it early.
All right. Is there council consensus then to move this to legislative session?
Yes.
Thank you. And I think that's everything. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel.
All right, next, Ms. Phillips. We're going to start the Susan Phillips show.
Thank you for your
afternoon.
patience.
Good afternoon.
That's okay.
Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, let me get
I'll
myself
just send everybody a copy of those.
Yeah, I got it.
organized. Yeah, I've got plenty for everyone.
Mr. Council President, would there be any willingness, considering at least the first three are going to be similar, 324 Poplar Hill, 527 Wales, and 524 East Isabella, to sort of consider them as a group? Because we're largely going to be saying the same thing over and over again. If we
Yeah,
don't-
I'm looking at this entire process as kind of a consideration of all of them. as-
Okay, well, I knew that the
The
one's a
Lake
little
Street
different,
property
but-
is a little different. so
Yeah.
I didn't want to pull that one out.
That's a little different, I like to discuss
But,
that.
but, yeah, I think however you want to present them in the most
Let's-
expedient fashion
Okay, let's go for the top three, and then
Okay.
we'll discuss Lake. The
separately.
top three are gonna be pretty easy. I'm gonna start just by passing around some pictures. I'll give you the color, and I've got some black and whites.
All right, I'll pass the color.
And Mr. Spees did just email us pictures.
Yeah, we got,
Okay.
we have.
I will say that the top one is prior to fire damage.
That's Mr. McKenzie's house?
Across the street.
Mr. McKenzie?
Yes, right across the street. I think there might be one extra if you want to pass it down. So I'm proposing donations of 3 properties, 324 Poplar Hill Avenue, 527 Wales Street, and 524 East Isabella Street. 324 Poplar Hill Avenue is a property that up until now, or actually not even till now, we've not had any code enforcement issues with. This is just a fire damaged house that the owner, Christine Wolf, had no options basically to fix the property after the fire. It's just been sitting there. We talked to her about a rehab plan, and she said, I really don't know what to do with this property. I don't have any assets to fix it, I didn't have any insurance on the house. Would the city be willing to take it as a donation? It is a total loss, the insurance said it was a total, I'm sorry, an adjuster came in, she had it assessed by different contractors, she said it was a total loss. She doesn't have the funds to fix it. I said, absolutely. It would be one of those that we could put on the community development initiative that we're currently working on. The lot has some value to it. I do have a potential buyer. I've had someone contact me and is interested in buying it once we do our thing with it.
With this house?
Yeah, the house would be demoed once that's prior to damage. The entire second floor and attic has been destroyed. I don't have any pictures of it. Mr. Spees, did you see?
I'm going to buy anything.
Okay. It is destroyed on the inside. There's the fire damage is extensive. I talked to the chairman of the Historic District Commission, and I have it scheduled for a historic meeting on August 26th. While he could not give me any kind of answer, he said he did feel that it was one that he would support for demolition only because of the extensive damage. He did not feel like it could be renovated and fixed. And looking at it myself and just having the experience on sitting as a secretary for the Historic District Commission meetings, I don't feel like it has any significant characteristics. The only significant characteristics on the house is one stained glass window. So I don't think it's going to be an issue with it getting approved for demolition through the Historic District Commission.
What can they build on this lot?
It's a buildable lot. I've already looked into it.
It's a buildable lot?
Buildable lot, yes. And that's what the potential, the interested party would want to do with it.
Question, was this owner occupied or rental?
It was owner occupied.
It was.
It was.
With no insurance?
No insurance, yes. And the only monies owing on it are the current year taxes, which is $1,251.61. And Tom has talked with Mr. Strasburg, and there is some interest in maybe working with us with waiving some fees. Tom, I don't want to
Not on this property in particular, but
No.
perhaps others going forward that are in, let's just say, a more severe state of distress.
Disrepair.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, in distress in terms of being
Yes.
stagnant and what have you.
Okay.
So the second one that I have is 527 Wales Street. This is one that we have had a long history. Tom knows this actually goes back to BHC days, Building, Housing, and Zoning. This is one that we've had many, many issues with. Seeing this go down would be a good day because it's been an attractive nuisance is the only way for me to put it.
Do you know when this was built?
Drew? I will tell you.
Not a big deal, but
527 Wales. You have an estat on it by chance?
Yes, he does.
And this is the small yellow
Yes.
house?
It was built in 1918.
1918.
yeah,
1918.
I was thinking about that.
We've had this in court. He's not shown to
Who's the
court.
owner again?
James Windsor, it's the estate. Carrie Windsor is named as the representative for the estate. It's now in transition to being another family member. We have some clean and lane bills. And we have current year taxes.
The lawn?
Could you describe the nature of the nuisance?
It's been,
You know.
we've had graffiti on the house, we've had constant people in the neighborhood throwing things at the house, busting and chipping the asbestos siding, busting out windows. We've had to board up the windows, trash being thrown in the yard. It's been we've had to constantly cut the grass, pick up trash, constant nuisance type violations. I mean, it is the absolute typical definition of an attractive nuisance. It is attracting that nuisance type behavior. It has been just a problem for us since
It's a broken window.
It is absolutely, it is that.
Is the
So
one on the right of
it-
it boarded up?
I'm sorry?
Is the one on the right of it boarded up? The windows look really dark, that tan one or gray one.
That looked more like it was vacant at the time. I don't think it's boarded
Yeah,
up.
I
though.
can't tell.
That picture that I gave you was something that I printed off of Google Maps
It's a street view. of
just
the
now.
building.
Yeah,
So I
that's
don't
what we-
have-
They're very old.
Yeah, I was
what
looking at
they're
that too, and I think
windows.
it's darkened windows, but I don't think there's any, maybe
I
no
didn't
one
It's
living in
reflective,
there.
because there's no wood on the outside of it. You see the window frame, so I'm
Next
just wondering.
time I come here for a donation, I'm gonna have one printed, a current picture printed. This is something I got off Google Maps, they're a couple years old, so.
Yeah, yeah,
On that
that's okay, I'm
one-
just.
On that one picture, that Google map, you can see something in one of the windows that
It's like a chair
indicates
back
it's
or
not boarded.
Yeah, I see it now.
But,
I don't think that
But-
gray house is vacant. Is this a buildable lot, Susan, 527?
It's
She
small.
said-
It's not really
It's-
hardship, right?
It is not the, I've been talking to Bill Holland about it.
Okay.
Bill Holland said it would be one of those non-conforming
Yeah.
uses of a building lot. He said that it would have to be one that someone came to him with a plan, and he would have to see if it would match. Because if it's odd shape in the front, it would not be one that it's right out of the, code that's.
It would meet the current requirements. I guess it would require a variance.
not,
I don't know if you could get a structure on that site. And
It
I asked
should
that
be.
question because I'm wondering, you know,
Because
if we
it's-
take it on.
Even
that
to
we wanna
match the
maintain it.
exact footprint of the
Because
building
it's
that's there
less-
now?
It's less than 5,000 square feet.
Well, I'm
Oh,
wondering,
definitely.
Yeah,
one of,
but it would have been buildable when at time of subdivision, so it should be. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Mitchell, I didn't
that's
mean to
okay.
talk over.
I cut you off. Go ahead. I was just curious about, that was one of the reasons I was asking about that home. I don't know who owns the ones on either side, but if it's not buildable, if it were maybe subdivided between those two property owners so that at least it would be the upkeep would be there, and, you know, if we can't build on it, we can't sell it, and, you know, or do anything like that, but just thinking about uses for it after that building comes down. And my other question is about bringing the buildings down, the demos on these. We have some of the ability to do that now ourselves, as I recall from our last conversation.
We do.
Right, okay.
Right now, we've been contracting them out to contractors so far, because so far we've just done one.
Okay,
But our future plan is to do them in-house.
okay.
And right now, I have some grant money to do one more out of some community development block grant money.
Is there?
And we still don't do control burns, right?
No, we do not.
Not in the city.
Well, nobody's been able to say why, other than the city stopped doing it
Well, out in the county, but not.
Yeah, in the
county they do
but
it.
in the city you can't. Right. You can't.
because of the proximity of
And,
the,
and it's getting harder and harder to do in the county due to EPA regulations, things like that.
okay,
Really
that was
depends,
my
yeah.
question, was
It's getting harder and harder.
where that was
It
coming
takes so
from.
much money to get it prepared to do that, even in the county, that it's almost not, doesn't
I don't even
offset
think
your
they're doing it
demolition.
anymore hardly in the county.
There's obviously city water and sewer to this property, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is there an existing well on the property? I'm thinking toward, you know, if we're gonna use this land up, you know, I don't want to see it sit there as an orphan property, but it could be used for a community resource, like the, you know, the gardens would be, you know, if we've got running water there that isn't hooked up to the city, it's free water.
I don't
So,
know about a well, but I do, that would be an option, because as I've been trying to plan on what we're doing with some of the properties that we're getting, that is always one of the options for the ones that are not buildable. I've been talking to Habitat about this property, and they said right off, because it was less than 5,000
Too small.
square feet, because that's basically what's buildable and what's not, that's a threshold.
Right.
They said they were not interested in this property. At first, they were excited about it, because they said, oh, yeah, and then when we looked at how it was cut out, it's so odd shaped, they said, I'm sorry, I would love it, but it's one that we're not interested in. And then Molly from Habitat even said, I think maybe some kind of a garden would be good.
Well, there's a community need there. Can
For
be
this.
met
Well,
there,
I'm gonna tell you
certainly.
right now,
Mr.
I heard about the community garden that just came out over
What?
there on Camden Avenue.
Mhm.
The kids are picking the stuff off prior to
that-
them.
That's not entirely true at all. As someone who's very involved in that garden,
Yeah,
you're
well, he
getting
said
bad
that
information.
someone that was involved in the garden said that the kids are picking the things prior to them coming.
Very important that we be accurate
Well, I mean,
in
I'm
the
just telling you what
information
the
that we.
man told me that works there, works in the garden. He said he had picked some stuff, picked up, things like the eggplants are supposed to be this big, and they're doing it like that.
It's a minor problem.
So yeah, very important that we
Peppers in
speak
the-
accurately about
I
the
mean, I thought
garden.
he was speaking accurately because he worked in the community garden. He was one
No.
of the people.
So
got
that
it.
did happen one time,
Yep.
and you know, in the course of the 4 or 5 months that it's been active, one negative incident, and all of the young
I
kids,
mean, I'm just
all the young
saying,
kids who
that's
did
what
it
he said.
were actually not, I don't want to say caught, but were
Punished.
met,
Engaged.
were engaged and met by one of the pastors who was involved. Had a great conversation with them, taught them about responsibility, that it was their garden, that it belonged to them. They have been back and have been involved since, the very same kids. He
Okay.
knows them by name, Pastor Hutchinson knows them by name, and is working directly with those kids.
That's
They have a
great
better
news.
understanding, it is good news, and I mean, talk to the officers who work that neighborhood. I mean, it has been a catalytic, project that has changed North Camden.
Yes.
It
And
has.
some of it was not, they just didn't know, like the melons, trying to figure out whether they were ripe or not. So we taught them how to learn, figure out when they're ripe, not throwing them on the ground to figure out if they're ripe, but, you know, just education and involvement. And he has pulled every one of them into it and engaged them
Okay.
in doing that, so.
As far as a well,
Mr. Tillman did weigh in
Hold
that
on one second.
he thought it might be buildable if you followed the same footprint.
Laura, hold on one second.
I'm sorry.
well, as far as a well, I'm sure if it's got city water, the well that was there was condemned at one time, so there should be at least a tracking to find out if there is a well that you could reuse.
And it can be used for irrigation
Right.
purposes, and it can
Right.
be
Right, I'm sure.
Why would it be a well over there?
Well, the thing was built in 1918.
1918.
There were no
Didn't have
city
city.
services in 1918. So the well may have stayed virtually intact all this time. It might be in a, you know, a back room of the house or underneath the house or somewhere near. But it's worth to, you know, take the metal detector out there and have a look. If you were going to think about using the property for a community garden. And this is certainly a place that could use that sort of togetherness, you know, as Camden has experienced.
All right, so that's the second property, and
That's the
I'm
second.
sorry, your point about whether it was buildable?
Yeah, Mr. Tillman.
In other words, if you follow the same building envelope, I gather though that Habitat wasn't interested in constructing something that looked like that, is that correct? I mean, their real reason is there's no legal impediment,
Yes.
but they aren't interested in building a house
Yes.
on that footprint.
Yes,
Okay.
but someone else
That's-
might be.
Someone else
If there
might be.
were someone who were interested, I think it could
Is
be
it a two-bedroom
constructed.
house?
I don't know. I've never been granted access to go in, although I've tried many times.
One other point to consider, as we come across these properties and we're doing this, when we have lots that aren't buildable, and they don't need the city water and sewer, perhaps that EDU associated with that property could be contributed to the bank, the EDU bank, to help keep that flowing,
Right.
pardon the pun.
Agreed. Absolutely.
The third one is 524 East Isabella Street, also owned by the same estate, represented by the same person. That tally is quite a bit more. That's what they owe, 14,000. That's totaled up from back taxes and a demolition. We tore the property down due to, there was a fire there. The house was in very bad shape. $5,301 makes up interest. So, and then there's citations and administrative fees. The demolition was, I want to say maybe 9 of that.
Susan, forgive me, what is due to the county, if anything?
2,200.
Would this be a similar situation that we'd need to pay?
Well, we got to pay, we're asking for
Yes, that's
We're asking
a good
for
size lot.
Well, I mean, we're likely never going to recover our 15,000 anyway, so we might as well get control of it.
Right.
And that's buildable.
They're not gonna
That's
get there.
We
Mr.
also-
Tillman?
We also need to make, do at least a partial bring down or title search on these properties
Yes.
too, to make sure that there's no other outstanding mortgages or liens that have to be dealt with.
Okay.
Yeah. And then those are the 3 I wanted to do all together, and then we will talk about Lake. Lake is just a little bit different, but I don't think that's going to take very long.
Okay, so, taking these one by one, quickly. 324 Poplar Hill Avenue, is there council consensus to
Yeah.
move that to legislative session?
Yes, it's built,
Yes.
yes.
There is. Now on 527 Wales
Yes.
Yes.
and 524 East is.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There we have three. All right. Okay. Next item on the agenda is 317 to 325 Lake Street.
Yes, this property is, I don't have a picture of this one. I think we're all familiar with this. This goes back a long time. The most important thing I can tell you about this are two things. Three things. I have a letter from EPA that says that the property is not contaminated. I have a letter from MDE saying the property is not contaminated. That's the two positive things.
Really?
And then the negative thing is that there's a $50,000 deed of trust that we would need to pay if we acquire this property. But the property has a lot of value to it. The property's been sitting there in a very deplorable state for quite some time. And something needs to happen to it. If we take possession, we have control over what happens. The property is currently leased to Purdue. It's bringing in some income. That lease could be transferred to us, so we'll be bringing in some income off the property. If we don't do something, this is our chance, basically. If we don't do something, it's gonna continue sitting there. And this is gonna continue its state, and it's gonna get worse. And we cut the grass every 2 weeks at the city's expense, and we never recoup that money. So we've really gotta do something.
Susan,
So I'm pleading at this point.
I can tell. Can you talk to us about the ownership of properties on that side of the river? Are you able to at all dig in?
It's all land.
And the city owns some of those.
Yeah, we own, our utilities department is around the corner.
Mr. Williams, you got something for us?
This old man owns.
You went running, so
Yeah, old
I think
man
so.
He wasn't supposed to run out on this one. He could.
He went to get something.
He's
He
old.
started
He
to come
does.
to.
Yeah, he's researched the heck out of this property.
The lease that we have is made, so as you read in your stuff, was several years ago, and it's not been updated at all.
Drew, you're going to have to speak into the mic.
I'm sorry. As they've said in the research, the lease was negotiated several years ago, and it's never been updated at all. It's $1,500, and at today's money, it should be somewhere around $2,000. So it should be renegotiated, if nothing else.
Well, the history is that the previous mayor had wanted to pay that $50,000. And the council, there's three of us that voted to pay the $50,000 from this old man. He must be 90 if he's living.
Yes,
He's an old man.
yes, Mr. Kabeloff.
And we had the same information that you just gave about
Yes.
the contamination
Yes.
and all that. When the election came about, it was vetoed because people did not want to acquire the property because of linens of the week and whatever all that stuff is. But we had an opportunity, whatever year that letter was written,
Right.
to get that property. If we have, well, I don't have a problem with it because this is a main thoroughfare of our city. And if we're talking about urban greenway and all this other stuff, Main Street master plan, we need to look at what's going on between 50 and Isabella Street and clean that up. And since we have in-house, I've spoken to Tom, we have people just clean it out and you have empty space. And like you said, it's worth money. And that was part of the Northeastern
Absolutely.
Collector Study, and this could be a beginning. See what I'm saying?
Hey.
And I'm for it. I never was against it, so I'm for it, and I'm happy that you brought it back because it's an eyesore for our city. And I think once that gets torn down, I think almost our city will almost be perfect with not having deteriorated properties on a main thoroughfare. I'm thinking this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, let's also remember that even in very, very recent history, our downtown master planning process with Envision Salisbury, the tours that went up Lake Street, and the perspectives that the students offered on that corridor and the things that should and should change and should happen. I think that's something that I would recommend happen sooner rather than later, but I also recognize we've got other priorities within that same corridor. That And I think anything that gets us closer to better addressing the current situation with the bridges. You know, if we can move you and all of their interests downriver, I appreciate the rent that we receive currently, but you know, or that the current property owner receives. I think anything that we can do to begin that process works better for all of us and the things that we're trying to do throughout downtown and the core of the city, including the North Prong, eventually. So I like it.
Also, keep in mind that because this was a brownfield site, there are grant monies for redevelopment, economic development on former brownfield sites. So there's some opportunities for whomever takes over this property to incentivize doing that and help with that.
What's he gonna say? He's got a lot to say. Come here, so we can hear you.
I've been looking into that very issue, but fortunately for the environmental concerns, it's been taken off the brownfield master inventory, but that also means that it's no longer eligible for grant funds. So
Not
it's
for cleanup, but for redevelopment, because it was on.
there's brownfield tax credits that we could potentially utilize, but the brownfield funds at the state level are really for only cleanups at this point, and it's no longer on the brownfield master inventory. So
Did you look at the federal level? Because that's
the,
where I was
the
looking.
federal level, the EPA and MDA actually divided these two sites. EPA took over 315 to 317, and they did the investigation on that one, and that was under the EPA's domain. But these sites were actually entirely under MDE, and EPA did not become involved in this. So I could look some more in terms of the EPA, but largely they've been focusing on cleanup and those that are still listed on brownfield master inventory.
When were
So-
they taken off the inventory?
Well, 315, 317 was mistakenly left on the inventory, and I spoke with Barbara Brown of MDE some months ago to see if we could get money available, and she said that that was a mistake on their part, and it was merely left there as an accidental archive. So 315, 317 was just taken off a few months ago, and 317 to 325 has been off since 2009, I think, whenever the MDE letters came out.
Well, there's still other opportunities, strategic
Yes, there
demolition
are.
grant for
Yes,
economic
yes.
development. There's a lot of-
We have looked at SGS DRIF for those properties, but that requires a follow-up of what we're going to do on that, and at this point, we still have to decide what that is. Without having acquired all the properties on the area, there's only so much we can do at this point.
Mr.
So-
Stillman?
Just a couple things I think we just need a little more information on. The proposed agreement to convey real estate refers to the mortgage and principal amount of 50. With the city assuming any obligation, there could be interest accumulating on that amount, which could be substantial. I don't know what that might be, but the way that's worded, that's what that implies to me.
Okay.
And then the other thing I would suggest is that you get some kind of update on what the cost would be to raise that facility, because the letters from the state of Maryland do indicate that excavation could reveal additional contamination.
Yes.
So you definitely need to just go into this with your eyes wide open as to what the actual cost of the city would be. It looks like it may be a finite cost, but I'm not sure we know what that is at this point.
Okay.
And deed searches,
That would be part
Or
of
lien
determining
searches.
some of that. And yeah, getting payoffs from the man who obviously holds the mortgage.
Well, were we to find any further contamination underneath any of the structures, would that put us back on the list?
Well, the state says that, I'm not sure whether it would land you on the list or not, but the state says it would have to be done in compliance with the law. So we could, it might not just be tearing down those structures, it might also be removing lots of soil and doing whatever has to be done with that. It looks like there's no current groundwater contamination, but that doesn't mean there's not ground contamination that has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
What's the condition of the bulkhead there, do you know?
My understanding is,
functioning.
from what is here.
Is it in good
that-
condition?
Who's using it?
Yeah,
Okay.
is that it's okay, but I don't.
so that's what the
That's
leasing.
one less
Yeah,
expense
it's in
for
good
us,
shape.
actually, yeah.
Okay. Well, are there other questions or comments then? Mr. Heath?
Yeah, I've read the analysis that was done. And to be honest, it's a little confusing. Under 6.0 on our page 98, in the information we received, do you read the first paragraph there? And it refers to the table which is on the previous page.
On the previous page?
There's a table on
You
the
said
previous
6.0,
page.
right?
I know we've got the letter.
But it doesn't exactly
that-
jive with the report.
That doesn't jive to me, unless I'm mistaken.
Just to clarify, that report's from 2004, and that was not a Phase 1 assessment. That was merely a site visit that was paid for by the EPA. So in 2004, contaminants still did exist, but according to MDE in 2009, those contaminants were below levels that were the necessary threshold. As far as the ground soil itself, I believe one of the memos from Tom to Mr. Pick speaks to the fact that we would have to remove any contaminated soil, but my understanding is from a typical demolition that would not be a substantial amount of soil.
Was there additional remediation between the 2004 site visit that's in this report and the 2009 letter?
Only, no other remediation, only the wells that were put in. As far as I know, remediation that's available in terms of what's in the files that we received from MDE. If you'd like, I can continue to speak with MDE in regards to this particular property. But, I mean, over the course of 5 to 10 years, I think contaminants they do dissipate with time. So.
They did have tanks there. during
And they're
that
gone.
time, And they were removed under Tom's, am I correct?
Yeah, we had them removed.
They were removed under Tom's leadership. So that probably might have been why they found what they found,
It's
because
possible.
the tanks were still there, the oil tanks.
We had them removed,
Well, so they removed dirt? They've
Yes.
removed the dirt?
the tanks.
No, the
No,
dirt is still
I'm
there.
talking- Okay,
Yeah, the dirt's still there.
just so you know the process, because I've been through it.
Yeah.
You take a tank out, they're going to come in, and they're going to test the soil. Any soil that's contaminated has to be removed and incinerated. And they keep going until there is no detectable limits.
Contaminants.
It's not cheap.
It's
Now-
like cutting out a
It is not cheap.
You keep on cutting until it's gone.
Right.
Now, I don't know if soil was removed, I just know that we were required to have tanks removed, and it was completed. Now, I don't know if soil was removed at the same time.
It'd be interesting to find out if we can find the documentation whether they removed the soil, because that's where the ground contamination would come from.
I will double check, but I'm pretty sure they did not remove the soil. But from the city's standpoint, in terms of maintenance, that's not a large concern. I mean,
That's a concern for me.
okay.
I'd like to see
That's a
the-
big concern
Why?
for
I'd
me.
like to see the numbers you just cited, Theo, a few
Sure.
moments ago.
Is the MD EPA letter both in there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do have both.
Cutting the grass will look cheap compared to digging out that
Yes,
soil.
yes.
And then replacing the soil.
If we disturb the soil,
Everything's
if you
gone.
just tore down.
Yes, the
buildings,
above
you
grade
disturb the
tanks are
soil.
gone as well.
Because, see, what happened, when they
Buildings are
prolonged
there.
this, now we've lost the brownfield eligibility. When we should have done this immediately, and we didn't do it, so now we're caught up.
They have strict guidelines on how those are used, that it's
for the
in,
cleanup.
it's incumbent upon the owner, and some of that money is only available when the owner is, can't remember the specific term, but unresponsive, I believe. So in other words, if someone has abandoned the property, that the EPA or MDE would give the city money, but since the owner is responsive and we would become the owner, we don't meet that classification either.
Well,
Tell us
could
that
we,
answer.
could we ask for a stipulation that he's responsible for the cleanup, should there be an issue?
He did, the man is gonna die, he's 90, almost 100. You
Well,
know what I
but
It
mean?
doesn't help,
Yeah, but I think
it
the-
doesn't help us.
I know,
there was-
but we,
The responsible party is, I mean, the way these things track back is both to who created the pollution, but then,
He's dead.
it can be passed.
He's dead.
It can be passed on to a future owner, depending on what you know, and when you know it, what you're
What
willing
I'm
to
saying, the
accept.
future owner was
Could
the
it be-
all tank man. The previous owner was the all tank man, then the old man bought the property. We had an opportunity to get cleanup funds and we did not take the opportunity. But it seems like all the pollutants, and I'm getting kind of, this project has been dear to my heart. It seems like all the polluting things is on this side of town. All the polluting things is on this side of town and we can't seem to get it cleaned up. We gotta clean this stuff up. And we got the plant there, that's getting foam coming up out of the sewer system that I've taken pictures of, that's polluting. We have cancer rate over there. Now we got this oil tank problem, which we need to address. Regardless who's responsible, the city needs to take responsibility to get that otherness out of that area, around those residents, because they deserve to have a better site than what we have now. And that's all I'm saying. It seems like we drag our feet. 2004, they came down, we had contaminated soil. 2009 or whenever the election was, it got vetoed where we could have got the money to clean it up. Unfortunately, that was a political thing. This should not even have to be political. This has to be doing with environmental safety for the people that live there.
I agree. I think
That's all I'm
I
saying.
think if we control it, we have the opportunity
That's
to
right.
make decisions about it.
And-
You know, I think I'm concerned as well about the liabilities associated with it. But ultimately, I'm leaning toward controlling it and being able to make those decisions. So
And somebody who purchased it might be the one responsible for cleaning it up. If we got a valued piece of property, let them, if they want the property, clean it up.
Can some of that responsibility be assigned to the estate in the event of the death of the owner?
I doubt it. I don't know.
If he's giving it to us, then
If we take it.
Well, I understand, but I mean,
Now, is the owner the elderly man, or is he the
Yes.
one who holds the mortgage?
Here's the elderly man, the
Okay.
old man. His last name starts with a K.
Kapiloff.
That's right.
And the deed of trust is what? What does that amount to?
The deed of
50.
trust, it says, is owed to somebody by the name of,
Herman Broad
Yeah.
of Cadillac Investments. Such a nice name.
so, you know, but yeah, once an individual dies, I mean, it's an LLC, but, you know, claims need to be made against that individual's estate within a certain amount of time, and if they're not, then they're gonna distribute the assets of the estate
That's what you
to the heirs, and we'll end up losing whatever.
So
potential we might have.
before we decide to take ownership or, you know, to move further, I think we still need to figure out, and we don't know that much about this property, but I agree with Shaney in terms of the ultimate disposition. You know, ideally, I think we control that property, particularly because we can then decide how we want to dispose of that property or develop that property or use that property as part of executing our broader vision for the core of the city. That being said, before we move this to legislative session, I think we have some unanswered concerns or questions just about liability and who's going to be responsible for what. And I don't know if we can get answers to that in the near term. I also don't know, and maybe you can help us understand what the pressures as far as time are.
Oh, I think that this is probably our last chance to get it, honestly, because I had to really, really push hard on the owner to get him to do this last time.
But Mayor Tillman had to do too.
It was not easy.
It wasn't easy for her to do that.
And I'm reading this, what MDE said, and I'm only gonna relate this to what I deal with asbestos for demolition, because I know that when we're doing demolitions, we have to comply with state rules. It says here, MDE says, residual petroleum contamination will remain on site, however, it appears this contamination poses no threat to human health or the environment. Future excavation in the area may encounter petroleum-impacted soil. If impacted soil is found, it must be handled in a manner that will comply with state and local regulations. Only soil related to construction activities need to be addressed. I'm relating that to the same way when we tear down a house, that asbestos needs to be handled. You just find a contractor who deals with that, and asbestos has to be handled by a licensed, certified asbestos contractor. what I feel is once you get into it, you have to hire a contractor who will dispose of that correctly. Just like you said, you have to dig down until it's gone. You have to find a contractor who will do that.
If you find it.
If we find it.
I,
Tell me if I'm wrong, because
all I can tell
I'm
you
not versed in this.
is, one of the plants that I used to run, we had to remove underground storage tanks and put them above ground. When we took out the underground storage tanks, they found, this was two 50,000-gallon tanks. When we took it out, they came on site, and the dump trucks kept coming, and the total bill for those two tanks was close to $800,000.
Oh, my gosh. Did you have any underground tanks on that site?
Where was it?
Connecticut.
Just, I was
Have any on-
thinking about the soil here and how everything leaches
The
through.
one
And
underground?
that's one of the things we ran into at the firehouse. It's not the
Okay,
soil
not a
that
cross
you think,
conversation at
that
the
it's not
case.
clay or
In
road.
Connecticut, there's bedrock as well.
Right, where you're not, it doesn't hold anything here like it does there, you know?
But also, we have sand, which allows it to go deeper.
But by the same token, we could be digging down 40,
40
50,
feet.
60 feet. Yeah.
And again, I'm just going by the data that I see here, and it scares me. Unless we get release from liability somehow, I think this is if I was gonna look at this to buy the piece of property, before I bought this property from the city, for instance, I would say, I will buy it at this amount of money. However, you're responsible for the cleanup of anything that because we're not just gonna do a phase one. If I'm gonna buy this property on the river, I'm gonna do a complete environmental impact.
Well, why doesn't NSCC hire an environmental company? It'll cost like $300 to go into the property and do a little sample.
That's what I was thinking, like we did at Linens after we already owned it, if we did that kind of investigation before we take ownership of it. Because even having release of liability, we still own it, and if we can't unload it, we still own the problem and the property, and we're still cutting the grass, and we're still doing all the same things. We just don't have the ugly buildings on there. But we really don't gain that much. I think that this is probably, as you're telling us, is our last opportunity. We've had several, it sounds like, and that strategically, it is a great thing to have that control and that oversight over which way it goes. But I do think that we need to know, as Mr. Heath said, exactly what we're taking when we take this in hand.
Well, and I think that we do. So if we could, would you, because timing is a little bit sensitive, would you be willing to let it go to council? And then in the meantime, I can make a phone call tomorrow. I work with Sussex Environmental. I can get a key with the owner has a local attorney, Laura Hay at Mr. Maloney's office. I can get her to meet me right away, and I can go in there within a few days with Sussex Environmental and get her to do a sample. And really, honestly, I think it's gonna depend on how far she's gotta dig until she gets clean soil.
Well, it's going to be more than one
It's more
sample
than
as
one
well.
spot.
Oh, I'm sure it's gonna be
complicated.
multiple throughout the property. And it may cost a little more than, I say, the typical $300. I deal with her a lot for properties. She is very, very trustworthy. She's very reputable. And see what we come back with.
What's
If
her
we
timeframe
comes
on
back
it?
with something exorbitant, we know this is not something that we want to get into. If it comes back with some good news, we know that this, and as soon as I get the results, I'll email you guys.
Is our typical timeline of 3 weeks, not next Monday, but the following legislative session, does that still work with your
I
timeline?
usually have the results within a week from her.
Okay.
I have a quick question. What is wrong with tearing the buildings down, not pouring the property?
Not what?
Tearing the buildings down?
I've been trying to do that. It's a whole legal process. And if we do that, we disturb the soil, so then we've got liability, we can't go there.
Well, and I think, as Laura said, this being a strategic acquisition, I think we need to consider the possibility that we may never want to part with it. We might be the end owner. We might also use it in such a way that it doesn't need much in the way of remediation. There are multitude of potential uses
Absolutely.
of this property.
My plan is, there's a neighboring property, the owner is Klaus Tripsick, and I'm gonna work on that one now, after I can get this one resolved, so. If we can get,
Oh, you
if we
enjoy
can get a
him.
big,
You know him, don't you?
if we can get a big strip of this property right there, side by side, we could really do
Claws,
something.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
to follow up on what Ms. Phillips said, that property is or was in errors in terms of the tax, and it went to tax sale, and I don't remember if it was bought or not, but needless to say, it is another stagnant property that, the one next door, it's now 117 LLC or something like
Yeah, it was
that.
EXO
Yeah,
something.
Did he die?
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know, but it's another stagnant property that is, just sitting there.
You wanna dig into it for me?
Yeah, no, that's what I plan on doing, so.
He can come up with anything. He can come up with
Susan,
anything.
I think these soil samples need to be not just in the open areas or where the tanks were, but you're gonna have to look under the buildings as well.
If there's something there,
If there's piping
Sue
there
White,
or an
Sussex Environmental will
indication
find
that
it.
there was.
She's very, very good.
Good.
Or she at least give us an idea what we need, because that's what they do is they're professional. They'll know what we're looking for.
She's great. I'll call her first thing in the morning,
Excellent.
get that going.
So is there council consensus then to move this forward with move this to legislative session with the understanding that we will be waiting for a report from Sussex Environmental, and can make our decision based on
Yeah.
additional information or a decision that we don't have enough information at that
Yeah.
time?
Can
Well,
we
it's
see
the
it at
best
the work
information
session
we're gonna
prior as well, so we get
We
that
see it at
report
the work
back?
session prior in
It-
2 weeks? If
it's-
you've got it in a week?
You may have it before then. As soon as
Okay.
I get the report, it's gonna be emailed to city clerk and then sent to you
Okay.
guys.
All
I
right.
feel we
To
need to proceed
Julia.
with the best information
guys.
possible, and this is
Yes.
the way to do it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
You've got consensus.
Okay,
I'm not comfortable.
understood. Okay,
Okay.
so there's consensus to
Okay,
move
great.
it forward.
Thank you very much.
You have the funds necessary to?
Yeah, I have the funds.
Okay,
I've got it. Okay, thank you.
very good.
Thank you very much.
All right, and let's see, the next item on our agenda is entering into a partnership with Wycomico Youth Partnership for Salisbury Wycomico Youth Civics Council. Thank you, and thanks for waiting for us, we appreciate it.
Got a lot of musical chairs here today.
Yeah.
We just need the music, that's the problem.
Mr. Speed?
Sir?
He can do his thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always has music.
Mr. Williams?
I just want to say Diana Parnell, the executive director of the Wycomico Partnership, is unable to be here today because the state local management board monthly meeting is occurring today, so she won't be able to. So if you have any questions specifically for her, I'll be able to relay them to her. Otherwise, I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Just a brief background. Last year, as you know, the Salisbury Wycomico Youth Civics Council worked directly with Wycomico County, and most of those interactions between myself and the county occurred through the Wycomico Partnership. Diana Parnell has been instrumental in the operation of it. She's the one that referred me to the Gosley Youth Initiative Fund through the Community Foundation that we were able to do the spelling bee through. She also was able to ensure that the fees associated with the Civic Center were waived because we partnered with the county agency. We use her facilities on Saturdays. I mean, the list goes on and on. The county proper has decided not to renew their obligation with the Youth Civics Council. Diana Parnell, however, would like to use state funds out of the Out of School Time Initiative to partner with the city. However, because she's a county agency, she does not have the authority to sign on her behalf. So we are not entering into an MOU. We are simply going to be supporting a partnership agreement that lays out what that partnership will look like. And Mr. Stevenson, the mayor, and I wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page, so that's why we're bringing this to council.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Williams?
Ooh, there are a few, but I probably ought not ask them here.
Are you sure?
I'm just curious why the county is not renewing, why they're not being
That's a
participating
county
in this.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was an explanation given or just no.
You would have to talk to Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Strasburg about that,
Okay.
I believe.
So will the name change then?
No, the name will remain the same because we still have a county agency and we want to focus on inclusion and we want to ensure that Mardella is still a part of it.
Okay,
So,
Excellent.
okay.
alrighty, less than 5 minutes. Sweet.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for today.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we weren't narrowing that to just city because of them not participating. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, and Mr. Tyree? Yes. Am I saying that right?
That's right.
All right. And you are last on the agenda this evening. Welcome.
Very much.
I understand you were here previously?
Yeah, I was
And I
here
was out of town.
about 2 weeks ago, and I know 3 of the faces were here, and I think Mr. Heath was on the phone.
Yeah.
Great. So I appreciate you having me back. I did not bring handouts this time. I think I passed them out last time. Not necessarily. If we get to that, maybe. If we get to that level of detail. But let me just do a quick introduction again of Pearl and the project, just as a refresh for people who were here, and a brief introduction for you as well. The name of the company I'm with is Pearl. We do multifamily development in 7 states. This particular project we are looking at is basically west of West Road, south of Queen Avenue, north of Chippewa. It was previously approved as a single-family home for sale project by Blair Rainier as the developer in 2008. We entered into a contract a few months ago with Mr. Rainier to purchase the property and pursue it as single-family rental property, with the intention of pursuing a tax credit that basically makes this workforce housing, affordable rents in the market. I wanted to just show you again for your benefit, although I didn't bring copies, but hopefully people have them from last time. But we did a very similar project in Anne Arundel County called Oakwood Family Homes, if you have the handout here. But these are single-family homes that are in the neighborhood of 1,400 square feet. We will do 64 units. 7 of them will be market rate, not income restricted. The other 57 will be between 30 and 60% of area median income in terms of restrictions. We will have some ranch floor plans for handicap accessible units. I think there will be 9 or 10 of those. So it's a very broad product that attracts market rate, restricted rents, like I said, disabled access. We have a lot of amenities on site. We'll have supportive services. We'll have a fitness room, a community room, leasing office, all on site. But one of the linchpins of bringing this project together is the tax credit financing, which makes up 70 to 80% of the financing for the project. So this, as we talked about last time, is a competitive process with the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. We submit applications September 8th of 2015. We'll probably find out in early 2016 if we win that award. And the state has scoring criteria that it's a 200-point scale that determines who gets these awards and who doesn't. Last time I was here, I was thinking I was introducing the project, and we got into some of the specifics about the support we're looking for from the city on this project. And, part of that support is obviously just the financial to help the deal come together, but part of it is also for the scoring system that the state uses. So they look for local participation in 2 ways. One is kind of what's maybe an investment in the property. So in some places, in counties in Maryland, they might have home funds that they get from HUD that they can put into a project, or different types of fee waivers, things like that, that they can do as that kind of upfront investment. And what we discussed last time is this property was subject to a annexation agreement when Mr. Rainier was pursuing it as for sale housing. And part of that fees that were related to the annexation were related to affordable housing. So in round numbers, that's around $2,000 per unit in today's dollars. I think it was $1,700 and change 7 years ago. And if you inflate that, it's around $2,000 per unit. So we are asking for a waiver of that fee as kind of that upfront contribution from the city. The second piece that is also very important, and in some ways more important because it's harder to achieve, is what they consider an operating subsidy. And the main way we can get that is through some form of tax abatement. And so that's the main request, and that's kind of the difference, I guess, from last time when I was here, as we kind of worked through the numbers, is looking at a way to get a tax abatement on the property. The city's website actually references in affordable housing, talks about a tax abatement program for affordable housing that I think has no taxes, no city taxes for 5 years, and then phases into the full tax amount in year 10. What we're proposing is a little bit different than that for a couple of reasons. One is it's just easier for us to project a flat annual amount per unit per year. And then the second thing is, and this is a little quirk in the state scoring system, they want to see the abatement be a 10-year minimum abatement. And in the city's kind of standard program, or at least the way it's described on the website, the taxes go into a full effect in year 10. So effectively, it's a 9-year abatement. So it actually wouldn't get us the points with the state. So that's probably the most fundamental reason that we're asking for a little bit of a tweak to the way we want to do the abatement. And again, this is maybe a little bit more typical of how it's done other places, which again makes it easier for the state to understand. But we did an estimate of how much the real estate taxes would be for the city portion based on how we think SSTAT would appraise the property. And we think it would be about $478 per unit per year in city taxes. We're asking to have that abated down to $225 per unit per year, growing at 2% a year. And the impact of that is really, it's just more stable for us, having no taxes for 5 years and then having a big jump over the next 5 years. With these kind of properties, because we're restricting the rents on the property, it's managing the operating expenses to a very fine level is important to us because we don't have a lot of cash flow on the properties. Again, we get an investment up front from an investor. We restrict the rents. We don't have the higher rents that you might have on a market rate property. So the importance of having kind of a sustainable operating expense is very important to the success of the project. The second piece of it is, we're doing a single family home development, which most affordable housing that takes place in Maryland is townhomes or apartments. And frankly, single-family homes are more expensive to maintain. You have 64 roofs instead of, one big roof. You have 64 shells of a building. You have 64 lawns. Your expenses are multiplied more on single-family homes than, say, an apartment building on a per-unit basis. And that's why the pilot's important to us. It helps bring those expenses down a little bit and makes them a little more predictable over the long term. So I think that's the difference from what we were talking about last time. And I hope, we can get your consideration for that tax abatement as requested.
Question for you. In this process that you go through where you apply, is it the way that it's done now? Is it done regionally, so that the state, or is there? It's just top 10 or wherever they are located.
Right, and so the state has a pool of credits that it's allocated by the IRS. So basically, $2.30 times the number of residents you have is the pool of credits each state gets. Right. Maryland basically just has a 200-point scale, and whoever the top scoring deals until they run out of credits are the top deals that win. So in theory, every deal awarded could be in Baltimore, or could be in, and there tends to be a bit of a cluster kind of between Baltimore, DC, kind of in that range. I know that there is some consideration to changing that in the next, what they call QAP, it's the scoring guide. But as it stands today, in theory, all the awards could come in one county or one city. It's just a matter of the score at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I spoke to, I had your diagram, and I know Blair had a problem with the residents, the homeowners. He annexed the property and what he wanted to do. I know for a fact they didn't want the apartment like Westbrook.
Right.
They didn't want that, so they protested against that. And the design of the homes that you had is similar to almost the design, I think, that Blair had, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it's very similar, yeah.
It's very similar. So that project would complement the surrounding homeowners around there. And the homeowners that I did talk to, because many of them go to my church, and I showed them, and they didn't have a problem, that they thought it was nice. And when you presented the program, your presentation, you said it was geared toward more workforce housing.
That's right.
For workforce housing, and they had to make, what was the income?
Yeah, so, we're going to have a range of income. So 30% of area median income, I think, is around 20 to 25,000 a year, is to somewhere in the 50 to 60, I think it's right around 55,000 a year. So it's a pretty broad range in that.
And the people that live there have to be working people. Are they working people, or retired people, or?
They have to be able to pay the rent. I mean,
They have to pay the rent.
that's the bottom line.
Yeah, so that's.
Yeah,
No age limitations.
no age limitation.
Children are okay.
Children are encouraged in this kind, with a 3-bedroom product, we're going to have a tot lot in there. We're going to have a community building. So I wouldn't say encouraged, I guess, but that's kind of the audience that we expect to be attracted.
Said also.
Yeah, we'll have a community building with a leasing office. We'll have people on site at the leasing office. We'll have what we call supportive services, but it's really educational programs geared really toward who are the residents that are in the neighborhood. But some of those programs can sometimes be geared toward children, like after-school programs. They can be geared toward, a product like this that we intend to eventually sell to the renter. A lot of times we'll do classes on home maintenance and financial literacy and doing things to prepare them to be a homeowner eventually. So we offer different programs on site.
I was going to tell you about the, I think you told us that it has to be 15 years, and then the person who lives in that house can have an opportunity to buy it.
That's
and
right.
That you would renovate it if it needed any work prior to him buying it.
Right, and so just on a high level, the program we're using to finance it restricts us to rental for 15 years. At that point, we would try to transition to home ownership to the people who are there at effectively a discounted price, although we set programs in place so they're, not selling the house the next day and cashing a lottery ticket, but, we're selling to an affordable housing price point as well when we sell. And we would, do a cleanup of the property to make sure that it's, we're not leaving significant maintenance issues.
What kind of equity do they have built in at that point?
Yeah, so without getting too complicated about it, we size their mortgage to roughly what their rent payment is. So if they can go to the bank based on their mortgage, we go get an appraisal and say, this house in the open market might sell for $200,000. I'm just picking numbers, 150, whatever the number is. Based on their rent, they might get a mortgage for $50,000 or $70,000 or $100,000. That's what their mortgage is. And so in theory, they have the difference in equity. So if the price of the house is $150 and they can get a mortgage for $100, they have $50,000 of equity built in. We try to prevent that from, we're really trying to target the person who wants home ownership. And so we put what's basically a 5-year or sometimes longer burn off of that equity. So we'll put a soft second mortgage for maybe that $50,000. So, if they sell it the next day, they owe us that $50,000. If they sell it to somebody that's not qualified as affordable. So if they lose their job and they have to sell, as long as they find a qualified, affordable person, no penalty to them. If they're trying to cash in and take all that equity out the next day, we won't let them do that. So that's how we kind of balance that.
Then the partner with Salisbury Neighborhood Housing.
Yeah, we would.
Eventually, in 15 years, when they come time to.
Yeah, and we work with whoever, I know that we've actually started to put together a list of other organizations as well that help with some of these programs we have in the buildings. But yeah, when we get to, year 15, when we're selling the homes, we would work with any group, frankly, in the community that can help us.
They're in that area.
Yeah.
I resent the packet to all the council members.
Great, thank you.
So they have that. Sure. The Farmers Home Administration, when they do their loans for first-time home buyers, they do basically the same thing. If you sell the property before your mortgage is up, then you pay back the equity or the discount that they gave you over the years, or if you sell it to somebody who wouldn't otherwise qualify with them, then you pay that back. So it's not unheard of, obviously. And I like the program. I like it a lot. We see a lot of rentals and there's a lot of need for that. But the idea that you can rent while that's your price point or your ability to do and work into something where you can have home ownership and stay in the same place. So your kids have been raised there 15 years, but they're not having to move because you're buying a house. They can just continue in the same place. It's very attractive.
Thank you.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I did send a draft of a letter to Ms. Glanz about what we're looking for our application is a letter that basically says, subject to, and it's not even like a final thing, it says subject to final approval, we would waive these fees, which it puts the dollar amount, I'm going to ballpark it and say it's $120,000, something in that neighborhood, and we would grant this pilot at $225 per unit per year, and that's basically what we're looking for our application to DHCD.
Just 1 second.
Sure.
My numbers are right. The number one is about 150,000 total, roughly.
Yeah, ballpark, yeah.
I'm sorry, Jack, could you repeat that?
Let me just make sure. I think I used the wrong number of units. Let me just see.
I think it's around 2,100 times 64, so I think it's in the neighborhood of 135 maybe, but you've got to calculate.
Because I calculated on 64s, so
Okay.
that's, $128,250, roughly.
128.
That's for the pilot?
Yeah, that's without the 2%. So
Without the 2% increase per year.
My brain's not working right now. It's the best I can do.
Not bad.
It's better than the rest of us. I'll leave the figures to you all.
And when I was out, the conversation, I assume, did not address these particular issues at all at that point in time?
Toward the end of, so
It's not the way it came forward, but then it started to kind of
Drift.
lean that way, and then we realized we had some more things to be worked out, or they realized that they had some more things to work out with the administration, so it basically ended to be discussed further.
I think that's fair. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Well, is there council consensus then to bring, before I do that, I guess one of the ways we could do this is simply provide consensus to enable the mayor or support the mayor in his authoring this letter. We can simply do that unless we feel it needs to come to legislative session through the form of a resolution. Mr. Tillman?
What issue would be?
This is a preliminary letter outlining an agreement that would include a pilot and a waiver of fees, the affordable housing contribution, essentially from an affordable housing development,
Right.
Which would contradict the purpose of the affordable housing contribution. So it would really, all we're looking to do is empower the mayor to have the support of council in his letter. Or is the best way to do that to simply wait for the resolution to be sent and the mayor can send his letter? So you don't even need council to do it.
Yeah, I know one of the things Mr. Stevenson had talked about was that the annexation agreement might have to be amended to take out that, but I don't think we necessarily need that for our application. We would probably need that when we win the financing later.
Yeah, I mean, it's saying the city will waive and the city will do. I mean, to me, this is.
But I think the paragraph at the end says subject to approvals, if I remember.
I
right.
haven't turned it over.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what it says. That's what it says.
I mean, this is all we have before us. today, so that's why I'm leaning on that.
Yeah, yeah, okay, as long as it contains a statement in there that it's subject to final approval, otherwise I think you're in fact
Approving.
granting it and approving it, which that would concern me at this point.
Sure. Well, then let me do this. Is there council consensus to support the language included in the mayor's letter at this point? And we'll see this in various forms. We'll need a resolution for the pilot. We'll need to probably amend the annexation agreement. There will be steps.
Yeah, we'll need a resolution for the waiver as well.
And for the waiver as well. That's right.
When was your deadline? September?
September 8th is the due date. We intend to hand deliver on the 4th, so, yeah.
The letter will be
The
sufficient.
letter is all we need for the application.
Yes.
And I'm comfortable with there is.
Yes.
Okay, there is consensus. So, Mr. Tillman, that doesn't bind us to, anything that's not gonna come before council again.
No, and it just, if you would, just because I haven't thought about this until just seeing it this second, if you're gonna support the letter, that's fine, but subject to my discussions with the mayor about making sure that you're not bound by anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay? I just
Anyone
want to
object
keep,
to that?
No,
want you to think.
I was just going to put in a caveat about making sure that
Yeah, okay, just give me a chance to read
got
this
it.
again.
no
got it.
substantial changes.
You got it.
And frankly, if there's edits you want to make to that language and just, we tried to do it in a way that, we know that the state has accepted that kind of caveat and still counted the points, that the city was behind the project. So we like the language because we know it works, but if you have suggested changes, we're open to that too.
Yeah, no, at this point, I just want the opportunity to carefully read it.
Understood, thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate you coming. Thank you. Thank you. All right, is there anything else from the council members? All right, hearing none, at almost 6 PM, we are adjourned.